Greetings! In the name of Odu and Odulamare, all that is good and great, all that is blessed and beautiful, all that is creative and conscious, and all that is positive and possible. May the warm sun rays greet you each and every morning, and may your day be always full of joy. Hotep, I am Adisa Olabayo Bankole, your host to Mind Vibes, Thoughts from a Curious Mind, a bi-monthly podcast exploring and examining social phenomena then and now. Now, I want to get into a discussion about what I think is a very important topic, and which I call Honorary Whiteness, Hiarchy of Atrocities. Now, before we begin, hit that like button, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Now, let's deal with this honorary whiteness and hierarchy of atrocities. And what do I mean by that? I'm dealing with the issue that happened to Sister Whoopi Goldberg a few weeks ago, dealing with the whole idea of her view, her opinion. Because like Bill Maher says, you have to remember, the show is called The View. So Whoopi Goldberg was giving her view about what she sees as the atrocities that happened to the Jewish people in Germany, 1930s, the things that Hitler did to them. And she did not see it as an atrocity against a race, but the evils that men can do, that man does to each other, the inhumaneness of it. And all of a sudden there was this flurry of Whoopi Goldberg said something anti-Semitic, and even on Facebook, black folks went out of, many black folks, who some of them are idiots, but let's, we'll deal with that at another time. But they just went out of their minds. Oh, she should be fired. Why? She said nothing that merits her to be fired, nor did she say anything that merits her to be suspended. Yet, black woman in ABC, so this kind of fear that people live in under the whole guise of, corrective speech or tampering or canceling out your opinion about Israel or quote unquote the Jewish people, Ilhan Omar or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the quote unquote Jews that are in the Congress. Whenever they say something, no, we shouldn't do this for Israel. What is this nonsense? This kind of arrogance that now many of the Jewish or people who deem themselves Jews have gotten themselves into. Particularly those who, are trying to have it both ways, being honorary whites, but at the same time, but you can't talk about the atrocity that happened in Germany, the Holocaust of the Jews, because there was so much pain. When did you begin to deal with the atrocities that happened to Jewish people as the one and only, the atrocities upon atrocities? Because in doing that, what I believe they have become is an arrogant people. The idea that somehow or another their suffering, their pain, now that doesn't, again, diminish the pain, but you can't sit down there and deal with your pain being greater than others. Because in all of human epic, there have always been people who, trod on other people. And there have been people who have suffered. The indigenous people, African people, suffering in China, the suffering for the Koreans by the Japanese. There's always been that. The Turkish and the Armenians. But to take this particular time and period and this particular atrocity that was inflicted upon Jewish people, European Jews, by the way, because, there's a difference between the European Jews and the American Jews, because their skin color is more leaning towards the whites of Europe, of the Irish and what have you, and the Germans, right? So we're not talking about those who are the real quote-unquote Semitics in the Middle East. We're talking about those who came out of Germany, right? And you can't really, deal with that period of time as being the hierarchy of all atrocities. Because again, to do that is arrogant. Now, Tim Weiss was right to deal with the fact that Whoopi Goldberg didn't understand history, because she's looking at this particular period of time, this particular tragedy, as a mere inhumanity to man, the evils of men, what they can do to each other, rather than looking at it as an inhumanity towards a race. She didn't see it as a race. But now, Tim Weiss was right. Hitler saw the Jews as race. But you can't expect, this was not a factual thing that Whoopi Goldberg said. This was just her opinion. And yet, everybody got all up in it, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Hold up on the giddy up here. Because you're dealing with a beautiful, intelligent, creative, imaginative black woman. Ergo, her name is Whoopi Goldberg, but she is nevertheless black. Her skin is black. She can't change that. She walked down the street, people say, oh, that's a black woman. But you see, I've known black folks whose name is Green. And you see, Jewish people in America particularly could change their name from Greenberg to Green. Yeah, and I had a black friend in St. Anne's. Yeah, but he was blacker than black. And they were Tommy Green. He was a Green. He was not Jewish. And yet, there have been many Jews who have assimilated to the point that somewhere in the 80s they became honorary whites. Now, that does not demean or diminish their pain as a people, their collective hurt. That that's real. But all cultures have that. The Japanese, the young man who used to play on Star Trek, I can't pronounce his name, but he talks about him being in the internment camps, which was here on the American soils. Just like the enslavement of African people took place not only in Africa, but on this soil. South America, the Caribbeans. And so to deal with this idea that somehow or another, Whoopi Goldberg had to sit down and apologize, that doesn't make any sense. But simply because you now are in a space, you are now in a position of an assimilance to power, that all of a sudden you believe your atrocity is far more deep and far more painful than hers. Yet, she suffers every day. She suffers at the fact that she's looking at young black men like George Floyd, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin being shot by police. The brutality of police, the brutality of whites with this recent case with Armand in Georgia, where these two whites or these three whites got sentenced. Right? We're not just talking about police brutality, we're talking about white vigilantes. So that's what she suffers. She also suffers the indignities of having to go to the store and not being treated right, having to be followed around in the stores and not being treated right. Show me where there has been the killing with impunity by the police to a Jewish young man. Show me where there was a break-in, where the police came and shot up a Jewish young lady here in America. Right? And we're not even dealing with the issue with Israel and the Palestinians. We're not even dealing with that. But let us be real. There would be no Israel if there was not the European and the American government propping up Israel. So I wanted to deal with this because it seems to me that this notion of the hierarchy of atrocities that the American Jews, like the, I don't know what, defense thing or whatever they call them, are now dealing with this idea that you can't talk about it. You can't even make, reference to it. What kind of nonsense is that? How do we begin to heal each other? It's like India Ari and Trevor Noah says, how do we begin to talk to each other instead of at each other or past each other? Because if you cannot respect my issues, my experience, my tragedies, but expect us to give deference to you, then no, we are not going to move one iota to this kind of utopic society or to deal with any type of harmonizing with being human. Because if you're not, let's be real. I lived in the 60s, and I've seen what many Jewish people, Jewish landlords, Jewish store owners did to black folks. There was not this kumbaya thing between the Jews of America and black Americans. So let's stop that. There have been, some nice collaborations, but to deal with this idea that yeah, the Jews suffer. Hey, okay, fine, they suffer, but black Americans suffer too. Africans suffer. The Armenians suffer. The indigenous people suffer. The Japanese suffer. There's always been this kind of suffering, but you cannot make your suffering to be par none. Now, we could say as African Americans, our suffering is one of the greatest in humankind. And it is. But that we don't go around wearing it around our necks to say, look at us, we're oh boy, unless we are being attacked. Unless we're having to deal with certain things that the greater quote unquote white community is dealing with us, because we're still suffering. But yet, out of all that we have gone through, we still have maintained and survived and thrived as a people. That's the beauty of who we are as African people. But we cannot deal with any form of collaboration or humanity if you're going to constantly deal with another group's idea about their horrific past or their horrific things that happened to them to say, well, you have to look at me. Because to do that, then that makes you arrogant. That makes you an arrogant people. And we cannot move one iota beyond that. If all you're doing is saying, me, 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 me. Right? Now, we could say that as African Americans. We could say that as Africans. Right? The Japanese can say it. The Chinese can say it. There's not a group in this world that can't say, well, me, look at me. Right? But because many of the American Jewish communities have become honorary whites, they're trying to live or trying to have their cake and eat it too. They want to be near the power structure, but they want everybody to opine their atrocities that happened in Germany. So they want to be honorary whites, but yet still deal with the hierarchy of atrocities. And that is not moving towards a more humane society. So let me know what you think. Again, hit the like button, subscribe, share, and leave a comment, because I kind of want to start a dialogue here. But until the next episode of Mind Vibe, this is Adisa Olabayo Bankole saying, may we all strive to bend the arc of justice towards humanity and believe that peace and love can be achieved. Madasi P.